The strongest earthquake to hit Montana in more than half a century sent bartenders jumping over bars, food falling off of grocery store shelves, and woke up residents and dogs. There were no immediate reports of injuries or serious damage from the magnitude 5.8 earthquake that hit early Thursday. The quake was probably the strongest in Montana since October 1964 and was located along the axis of the Intermountain Seismic Belt. The initial earthquake's epicenter was about 6 miles southeast of Lincoln, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. A magnitude 4.9 quake rattled the same general area about 5 minutes later.
German police fired water cannon and pepper spray at protesters gathered to demonstrate against a G20 summit in Hamburg after a group of black-clad demonstrators threw bottles and other objects at riot police. Police expected around 100,000 protesters from around Europe who say the G20 has failed to solve many of the issues threatening world peace to gather for the demonstration dubbed Welcome to Hell by the anti-capitalist groups behind it.
At least 2 people are dead and 20 more remain missing as floodwaters ravage southwestern Japan. Hundreds of thousands of people on the island of Kyushu were ordered to flee as rising waters inundated homes, crops, and infrastructure on Thursday, July 6th. Kyushu is the most southwestern of Japan's main islands. The damage there appears to be concentrated in Fukuoka and Oita prefectures, which saw 50 centimeters of rain over the course of 12 hours on Wednesday. Heavy rain has been forecasted to continue through Friday, and landslide warnings have already been put into place. On Thursday, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said thousands of emergency personnel have been deployed in the affected areas, and at least 250 people have already been rescued. However, Suga cautioned they are still trying to assess the full extent of the damage, as there are certain areas that rescue crews still cannot reach. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
CNN has reported that a huge ice sheet more than half the size of Qatar could soon break off from Antarctica. If the Larsen Sea breaks free, it'll be one of the world's biggest ever icebergs, measuring 6,000 square kilometers or 2,300 square miles. That's the size of 4 Londons or more than 7 New York cities. According to the European Space Agency, or ESA, in early June, scientists said the Larsen Sea was 8 miles from the edge of the ice. It is now just 3 miles away. Larsen Sea is a portion of the Greater Larsen Ice Shelf on the northeastern coast of Antarctica. The ESA is monitoring the sheet through Cryosat, its mission dedicated to ice sheets in Antarctica and Greenland, along with a duo of ESA radars. If it drifts away, there are fears Larsen Sea could pose a danger to ships.
Not since the first debate between then-candidate Trump and Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton has a meeting between 2 people been so anticipated. All eyes are on Germany as U.S. President Donald Trump prepares to come face-to-face with Russia's Vladimir Putin during the annual G20 summit. While Trump continues to refuse to call Russia out on alleged hacking, no one knows what will truly happen when the two finally meet. As for the U.S., Trump said he wants to find ways to work with Putin, a goal that could be out of reach based on the many controversies surrounding Russia at the moment.
As he spoke in the center of Warsaw, President Trump was flanked by some of the U.S. troops who are based on the Polish border with Russia. And just hours before his first face-to-face meeting with President Putin, rare words of criticism from the U.S. leader.
We urge Russia to cease its destabilizing activities in Ukraine and elsewhere, and its support for hostile regimes, including Syria and Iran, and to instead join the community of responsible nations in our fight against common enemies and in defense of civilization itself.
Earlier, at a news conference, he used the same word, destabilization, when describing Russia's behavior towards Poland, but contrasts that with what he said when asked specifically about Russian hacking during last year's US election campaign, something all 17 intelligence agencies have concluded beyond doubt took place.
Austria appears ready to deploy hundreds of troops to block migrants from entering the country via Italy. Austrian Defense Minister Hans-Peter Doskozil told the Kronen Zeitung newspaper 750 troops have been placed on standby near Brenner Pass, a route through the Alps that links southwestern Austria with northeastern Italy. Dos Cozzil said border controls would be implemented, quote, very soon. But in a July 4th statement, Italian Interior Minister Marco Minniti expressed surprise at those comments. Minniti declared there's no emergency at Brenner Pass, calling the Austrian effort unprecedented and unjustified. Italy has also reportedly summoned Austria's ambassador to Rome. The country's been working to address an increasing number of Libyan migrants attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea. Through June 23rd, the UN Migration Agency had reported 84,000 migrant arrivals in Europe via the Mediterranean this year. More than 2,100 have also been reported dead or missing. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
The governor of California, Jerry Brown, has made fighting climate change a major theme in his time in office. Now he has taken the extraordinary step of announcing that his state would host a global climate summit. Brown announced the Climate Action Summit in a video that played at a festival in Hamburg, Germany. The summit will convene the world's climate leaders, including subnational governments, businesses, investors, and civil society. The summit is the latest in California's explicit efforts to resist the Trump administration's climate change policies. Immediately after Trump announced the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris deal, Brown, along with governors from Washington and New York, announced the formation of the U.S. Climate Alliance. The governors billed the group as a coalition that will convene U.S. states committed to upholding the Paris Climate Agreement and taking aggressive action on climate change.
TRT World's Ertan Karpazlı joins us on the set for more on this. Ertan, as we've just heard from Christine's news story, one of the main sticking points, one of the main reasons why these reunification talks collapsed was the idea of Turkey having a military presence on the island. What I'm asking you is if Turkey, Greece, and the UK have the status of guarantor countries in this conflict, and if Greece and the UK can have troops on the island, why can't Turkey?
Well, according to the way the international community looks at it, Turkey, the presence of Turkish troops in Cyprus is actually considered an invasion or an occupation because the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which broke away in 1983, is not internationally recognized, whereas the Republic of Cyprus, run by the Greek Cypriot administration in the south, is considered by the international community to be the legitimate government of the island, and they have invited Greek troops. And also there is two internationally recognized British bases in Cyprus, which hosts British troops as well.
Okay. Now, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres didn't close the door entirely on this. What's the likelihood that we're going to get all the sides back together at the table for another round or another attempt at reunification?
Well, after the failure of these talks, the chances are that the status quo will prevail at least until after the Greek Cypriot elections in 2018. And a new plan will be presented depending on the outcome of those elections.
Okay, and what's next for the people of the island?
Well, what's next is I don't really think that the UN threat to withdraw peacekeepers if these talks fail is, I believe that's a bluff actually, because the peacekeepers are needed now more than ever. The people have actually kind of lost hope, I believe, in the peace process. The United Nations has failed time and time again over the past 43 years to unite the island of Cyprus. The United Nations, because of the United Nations failure, I believe the regional powers, Turkey, Greece, may actually play a greater role in actually bringing about a solution. But as for the people themselves, I just feel that they've lost hope in their leaders. They've lost hope that their leaders will be able to find a solution. And I believe that they're more likely believing that a war is going to break out anytime soon, which hopefully will not be the case.
Okay, Ertan Karpazlı, thank you for putting some of that into perspective.
Thank you.
On Thursday, U.S. District Court Judge Derek Watson of Hawaii left rules in place for a travel ban on citizens from 6 majority Muslim countries. Watson denied an emergency motion filed by Hawaii. The motion requested he clarify what the U.S. Supreme Court meant by a, quote, bona fide relationship in its ruling last month. The Supreme Court ruled the administration could enforce its travel ban. However, it said those, quote, with a credible claim of a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the United States could enter.
Disused military tunnels snake beneath the crater of Diamond Head, out of sight of the tourists lounging near the volcano on Waikiki Beach, but very much on the mind of Gene Ward, a state representative from Honolulu. Alarmed by North Korea's latest missile tests and claims that its newly developed intercontinental ballistic missile can carry a large nuclear warhead, Ward believes it's time to refurbish the tunnels as civilian shelters in case of a North Korean attack. Ward said, referring to Pyongyang's latest missile test, "We've had wake-up calls before, but what happened on July 3rd is shaking us out of bed."
UNESCO is stepping into one of the world's most stubborn conflicts, and it isn't coming out unscathed. The Palestinians are asking it to declare Hebron and its Tomb of the Patriarchs endangered World Heritage Sites, but they're getting pushed back from Israel and the U.S.
The Tomb of the Patriarchs is a historical Islamic site, but Israel also declares that it's an Israeli site because it's tied to Abraham. The cave or tomb, which they call a holy site, is considered sacred to the Jews, which is also why they're expanding in Hebron and supporting the settlers living here. It's an important decision.
The Palestinians argue that Hebron and the tomb of Abraham and his family are at risk because of the Israeli occupation. But the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, argues they're under no immediate threat. And Israel says UNESCO shouldn't be turned into a political organization. Hebron is home to more than 200,000 Palestinians and 500 Israeli settlers. The tomb is located in the old city of Hebron, where most of the Israelis live, surrounded by Palestinians.
There is no doubt that if Hebron is registered as a part of World Heritage, will reflect positively on the city, which has large tourism potential. It is also going through difficult situations because of the Israeli occupation. However, designating this city as part of the World Heritage sends a message of peace, and it is also part of the Palestinian people's contribution to human history.
The Palestinians say Hebron and the Tomb of the Patriarchs are tied to their history. The Israelis say they're part to theirs and shouldn't be declared a Palestinian heritage site.
UNESCO is now discussing the status of the Tomb of the Patriarchs, a point of conflict for Palestinians and Israelis. Both sides are trying to win support for their positions, as well as trying to protect their historical connections to the tomb and to the city of Hebron as well. Hamad Hamayil, TRT World, Ramallah in the occupied West Bank.
Soon as the sun rises, Joyce Muthanya begins her journey across the arid plains to where she and her granddaughter collect water for the day. It's dirty, but there's no other option. The family would usually rely on maize for food and income, but the rains haven't come, so they've turned to this versatile crop instead.
You're lucky boy. In the past, we used to depend on maize in this area instead of sorghum, but now maize is not growing and we are looking to increase our sorghum production. It is doing better both for sale and for domestic consumption.
They've been helped by an aid organisation which promotes crops that tolerate drought.
We start with the farmer right from land preparation and various practices around the same to ensure that the farmer conserves as much moisture as possible at farm level, and employing practices like conservation agriculture so that not much water is lost at the farm.
But with 2.7 million Kenyans in need of food, many more need help.
It's a very, very serious situation in the Horn of Africa. You've got some 13 million people in 3 countries who are facing, the situation where they don't know where their next meal is coming from. So the drought is extremely intense.
People in Kenya, Somalia and Ethiopia are all suffering the effects of this drought, compounded by 2 years of below-average rainfall. It means those who, unlike Joyce, don't have access to resistant crops are suffering.
Those harvests have been lost, and that obviously affects food prices in the market. So the cereal prices go up, the livestock prices go down, and so people who have livestock as their resource aren't getting the money that they need from that, and then have a lot of trouble affording to buy any other kind of food because those prices have risen. So it's a really dangerous kind of mix of things.
Resources of every kind become more valuable by the day when you're at nature's mercy. Kim Vanel, TRT World.
The Secretary General strongly condemns the launch of a ballistic missile of intercontinental range conducted by the DPRK.
More condemnation and calls for global action.
But the US says North Korea has crossed a new red line.
North Korea's launch of an ICBM is a clear and sharp military escalation. The North Korean regime openly states that its missiles are intended to deliver nuclear weapons to strike cities in the United States, South Korea, and Japan. And now it has greater capacity to do so.
Since 1994, sanctions have been the only route to stop North Korea. But at best, it's delayed it.
The North Koreans have said it explicitly, implicitly, and every other way, they are never going to give up their nukes, because if they do, they are dead. They are Gaddafi, they are Ceausescu, they are whatever regime has been deposed that the West didn't like. That's how they see their fate if they give up their nukes.
The North has moved from provocation to perfecting, improving weapons they've been working on for the last few decades. So now that Kim Jong-un has launched his July 4th gift, a missile that could put Alaska in its range, President Donald Trump and the world is grappling with what to do next. On Wednesday, the US and South Korea test-fired their own missiles, aiming to show the North they mean business. But what they really need is China, North Korea's biggest ally. Trump has been urging Beijing to press Pyongyang to give up its nuclear weapons. Tweeting on Wednesday, the US president said trade between China and North Korea grew almost 40% in the first quarter. So much for China working with us. We'll have to give it a try. One way of trying might be to squeeze Beijing's finances.
We have now passed a new sanctions bill, sanctions regulation Treasury has, that would really go after Chinese banks and businesses affiliated with North Korea in some way. If that is really implemented, it will start to hurt the Chinese. So the Chinese will have to make some tough calculations.
And now that China and Russia are joining diplomatic forces, Trump too will have to make some tough decisions. The US president is running out of options. Since he took office, North Korea has been increasing its missile tests, the ultimate deterrent to the US taking military action. And when Trump meets with Presidents Putin and Xi Jinping at the G20, he may have to change his tactic. Sally Ihan, TRT World.
Philippine youth groups have filed an ethics complaint against Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre II for allegedly spreading fake news. The 14-page complaint was filed at the Office of the Ombudsman on July 5th. The youth groups Millennials Against Dictators and Akbayan Youth accuse Aguirre of violating Republic Act 6713 or the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees. According to GMA News, the complaint said previous Aguirre remarks contributed to the fake news epidemic and made him unfit to serve. Back in June, Aguirre showed reporters a photo of opposition lawmakers at a coffee shop in Marawi City. Aguirre claimed the photo was recent and alleged the lawmakers may have played a role in the Marawi City uprising. But the photo was actually taken in 2015. CNN Philippines said Aguirre has since denied showing it. For United News International from Metro Manila, I am Crystal Yap.
A new study says the price of climate change in the United States will be highest in the country's poorest areas. In a first-of-its-kind study published June 30th in the journal Science, researchers said counties in the southern and midwestern U.S. will be hit harder economically by climate change than other regions in the country. Study author Solomon Sean told the New York Times, quote, "The reason for that is fairly well understood. A rise in temperatures is a lot more damaging if you're living in a place that's already hot." The researchers said the rising temperatures will affect agriculture, labor productivity, energy costs, and coastal properties, among others. Sean told the Washington Post, quote, "The poor regions will get poorer and the rich regions will benefit. Climate change will have a very large impact on the quality of life and economic opportunity in the coming decades for ourselves and our children." For United News International, I'm Gabrielle Caldwell.
Hackers thought to be working for a foreign government have reportedly infiltrated the computer networks of power plants across the United States. According to an urgent joint report issued June 28th by the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, security specialists have been responding to attacks at various nuclear power and energy facilities since May. The agencies said they, quote, "are aware of a potential cyber intrusion affecting entities in the energy sector." The attacks reportedly affected at least a dozen power plants, including the Wolf Creek nuclear facility in Kansas. The chief suspect behind the attacks is currently Russia.